are live, ma'am.
Are we good?
Yes.
Terrific. Good afternoon. I'm Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, Chair of Public Safety Committee. Welcome to the committee meeting for Wednesday, May 4th. Luigi, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Lee is absent. Councilmember Buscaino.
Here.
Councilmember Harris Dawson. Councilmember Harris Dawson.
Present.
Councilmember Kretz. Councilmember Kretz is absent. 3 members and a quorum, Madam Chair.
Terrific. Would you please announce the call-in information for members of the public wishing to speak on any of today's agenda items?
Yes, Madam Chair. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 161-586-7607 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak.
Terrific. Dominique?
Hello.
Hi, Speaker.
Hi.
Please state your name and which items you'd like to offer comment on.
Items 9, 12, 13, 15, 16, 18, and general public comment.
Okay, you've got 2 minutes for all the items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
Okay, starting my clock here. So Monica doesn't have to get threatened with a cure and correct, and I'll sue the city. Again. Item number 9, ballistic items. They could have, ballistic helmets and vests, could have used them last night. Question, Public Safety Committee, how come the city's leaders aren't calling for the arrest and prosecution for felony assault where these items could have been used on item number 9 last night? Was it because the protesters were abortion rights activists? Because I don't hear that. And if the city isn't calling for the prosecution of abortion rights activists, I don't see why you need surplus ballistic helmets and ballistic vests. It seemed to have been a city-sanctioned attack on our law enforcement officers. So unless you call for their felony prosecution, I think you should vote no on item number 9 because you don't need surplus ballistic helmets and vests. Item number 12. We're talking about metrics here. Well, who's making the metrics of success? The police commissioners? Why don't you have a mixed use a panel to decide what success metrics are? And I volunteer to be the first appointee to that panel. I like law enforcement, but I don't trust the police commission. So if you want honest metrics, you know where to reach me. Item number 13. Active, what is this? Active bystandership? So you're pussifying the LAPD. You're telling them not to intervene and to stop, to sit and take notes and how to observe. Are you kidding me? Were you out there last night? Did you see them being attacked? Active bystandership wouldn't have done shit last night for the LAPD. And I support the rank and file. Active bystandership is just something you do to keep the progressives kind of happy about it. I guess.
Go ahead and go into public comment.
Well, yeah. I am concerned here that we have 3/5 of this panel running for office and that they are making politically motivated votes. For example, Joe Buscaino, he's going to finish in 5th or 6th place. I don't trust him to make honest votes on this commission because he's literally about to be beaten by Gina Viola, a completely unknown candidate, and I think Joe Buscaino would
stick to the items on the agenda.
Populist thing. Excuse me, you douchebag. This is general public comment. I'm commenting about the
stick to the items related to the committee.
Yes, I'm talking about the committee's fucking votes, you cunt. If you don't give me my time back, you're gonna get a claim.
You don't need to refrain from that language.
You're right. I don't need to refrain from it. How about that? You don't need
Come
to
on, you can
interrupt
do better
me
than
when
that.
I'm making
Come on.
He's not capable. Thank you. Your time is up.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That's disgusting language. Disgusting.
Mhm.
Hi, speaker. Please state your name and which items you'd like to offer comment on.
Yes, absolutely, Joseph is right. What a disgusting language. Yes. All items and general fucking public comment.
You got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes. So again, number 9. Yes, we need more weapons. Yes, we need to weaponize the LAPD even more now than it is. And of course, the LAPD couldn't solve a crime if it was in a bag of chips in front of them. I like that analogy. Yes, they're pigs. Yes, so we don't have to put vests and helmets. How about good detective work instead of weapons? No to the weapons on number 9. And yes to good, solid, honest cops. I know we can find a couple of them. If not, just go to Santa Clarita where Goat Puppet met 20 of them. They're really good cops up there. Then number 16, active bystanders. Holy shit. You're going to have active bystanders in the middle of a war zone? That's no good. Did you see that protest last night? Holy shit. But of course, they're in favor of abortion. And Monica loves abortion. And Joey loves abortion. He wished his wife had one. Yes, everybody here loves abortion. Yes, they do. So you're okay, but if you're pro-life, then you're going to get the active bystanders, and they're going to club you like a hard fucking seal out there in front of the streets of the LAPD. Now, we heard that somebody supported law enforcement, and yet they were cut off. And remember what Goat Puppet always says? Fuck the police. That's why he doesn't get cut off. Now we'll go to general comment, if I may.
All right.
Yes, you have 1 minute. Yes, thank you. Well, you don't have to do that. The chair does that, stupid. Who you calling stupid? I talk to myself. Anyway, I like your new security measures, Monica. I like how you have the building locked up under that fake protocol for COVID. You're very sneaky. You've learned a lot. Jose Huizar and Mitchell Englander, they taught you everything you know. And they all know about federal crime. And it's just amazing that no other council members have been arrested since Mark Ridley Thomas. I'm impressed. I'm holding a pool on who gets indicted next, and I'm losing money. So remember, everybody, this committee supports nobody but corruption, corruption, corruption. And thank you for not interfering with my time. Goat Puppet loves to talk and engage in the civil process. And again, Joey Buckets, you will...
Thank you, speaker. There's no other speakers in the queue.
Okay, just for a second, let's give another, if you want to raise your hand, please do so to speak. Just confirm there's no other speakers.
We have one more speaker.
Okay.
Good afternoon. As a stakeholder, I'd like to speak on 9 and general public comment.
Okay, you've got 1 minute for each. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd really appreciate this committee to consider perhaps holding off on any donations of surplus equipment. Law enforcement will be needing all equipment and personnel available this summer. I am very concerned about events that took place last night in downtown LA. I come from an antiquated bygone era where I believe my vote is my voice, but the kids today are not going to have any of that kind of talk. So if the sneak peek is validated this summer, I am very concerned. January 6th is going to look like a day at Disneyland. Considering what happened last night in downtown LA, 30 years ago is going to look like a campfire. I hope public safety is going to start considering how events are going to be handled this summer. I hope that nothing comes of fruition as the sneak peek is indicating. But again, we have to start planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no other callers in the queue.
Okay, so then we will go ahead and close general public comment. And colleagues, that brings us to the items on today's agenda. I'd like to recommend that we take items 1 through 4, 6 through 11, 13, 14, and 16 through 19 on consent. Is there any objections?
Move the items.
Terrific. Luigi, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Lee is absent. Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Councilmember Koretz. Councilmember Koretz is absent. 3 ayes, and these items are approved.
Thank you very much. And I believe for item 5, the CAO has a technical correction that needs to be read into the record.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, if you'll indulge me, I'm Ed Rose with the CAO's office. I just have a technical correction for item number 5. That's Council File 21-1320. It's the fiscal year 2021 Urban Area Security Initiative Grant. And in the summary section, second paragraph, page 4, I'll just read the first sentence. Because the performance period of the FY 2021 UIC grant commenced on September 1st, 2021, certain grant approved activities that will be reimbursed by grant funds have already occurred. And the second technical correction is on subsection on page 6, partner jurisdiction allocations and contracting authority. The sentence reads, I'll read this paragraph because there's several corrections. The Mayor's Office requests authority to execute subrecipient agreements with the cities of Alhambra, Beverly Hills, Burbank, Culver City, El Segundo, Glendale, Hawthorne, Inglewood, Long Beach, Monterey Park, Pasadena, Santa Monica, South Pasadena, and Torrance in the County of Los Angeles. Partner jurisdictions will receive a total of $32,048,552 in FY 2021 UIC funding. Attachment 7 to the Mayor's transmittal dated March 8th, 2022 provides a draft of the subrecipient agreement. The remaining $2 million in FY 2021 UIC funds is allocated to the Joint Powers Authority of the LA Long Beach region. That concludes the technical corrections, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Clerk, would you please call the roll for item 5?
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Lee is absent. Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Councilmember Koretz. Councilmember Koretz is absent. 3 ayes, and this item is approved.
Terrific. Thank you. Now that brings us, colleagues, to item number 12 on today's agenda.
Item number 12 is a Board of Police Commissioners report relative to community engagement expectations of the Los Angeles Police Department and the metrics used to measure the success of these assignments.
Thank you. And I believe I see Chief Tingerides, Brockway. Who else do we have?
With the
Fernando?
CSP Bureau. You're
Here
right.
we go. Oh, Joel Lopez is there,
Joel
and
Lopez.
Natalie Cortez. Good. Okay. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And so, colleagues, part of what has precipitated a conversation around this, obviously, we have the Community Safety Partnership that has also joined into this conversation. Because when we talk about community engagement and community policing and what that looks like, it's not by observation just in my own district, has not been consistently measured. And so it's for that reason that I wanted us to engage in a conversation, particularly when we have these very intentional efforts that are being deployed at some of our more critical sites. I've got the CSP at the San Fernando Gardens. We obviously, Mr. Buscaino and Mr. Harris Dawson, you have them in your areas. But I think what's most important is that when we talk about the evolution of community engagement and what that looks like, what's imperative is that we all, and Mr. Buscaino, you and I introduced a motion, I know it was your motion, talking about neighborhood watches and some of the efforts that at the time when you were a senior lead officer were paramount to how we derived critical hyper-local information, neighborhood by neighborhood, so that we could better address the concerns in those communities. And, I don't know if it's an onset of social media or, it's that some of those old school methodologies that I grew up with as a young organizer working for council offices, or that you deployed as a senior lead officer, or even going back to, I often refer to my first experience with Foothill Division as a young child, when our house was broken into and my parents organized the first neighborhood watch in our neighborhood. Those were efforts that helped to further embolden community partnerships and making sure that our communities were part of our public safety solution, and that we were very intentional, but we have to assure how we measure those engagements, and that we see the effort consistently regardless of what zip code regardless of what zip code you live in. And so for that, thank you, Deputy Chief Tingarides, Joel, Commander Brockway, and Commander Cortez for being here. And if you could just kind of open up a little bit about what some of the measures of how, whether we're talking about CSP or our senior lead officers or the work of our MTA, how are you all measuring the work of these officers in helping to broaden and advance community engagement?
Thank you, Councilwoman Rodriguez, and good afternoon, Public Safety Board. My name is Chief Tingarides, and I'm the Commanding Officer of the Community Safety Partnership Bureau. Thank you for having us today and having this critical conversation about community engagement and how we assess our efforts, which is extremely critical right now, post-COVID and post-civil unrest. So thank you for giving us this space to have this conversation. I want to say we're in our second year of the CSP Bureau being built, and our primary focus has been on how do we solidify this policing philosophy throughout the LAPD, and B, how do we measure our efforts and our engagement and create something that can also be modeled citywide. So one of the things that we did at the Community Safety Partnership Bureau is create a qualitative operational public safety strategy guide. And we looked at what our officers do daily as it relates to our safe passage, our foot beats, our deployment, our divisional engagement. Because we are in a bureau but assigned to different divisions, we are intentional about communicating and checking in with the divisions that our CSP officers are assigned in. And that includes partnering and coordinating with the senior lead officers at those divisions. Monthly, we've created a qualitative monthly report that has nothing to do with numbers, but engagement. And that qualitative monthly report includes the community and the officers identifying the crime vectors in their neighborhood engagement area, articulating who they partnered with and what they did to resolve those root causes and those vectors, what the outcome was from that partnership and that involvement, and then how do we sustain those efforts so that it doesn't repeat and we know that we really address the root cause of that issue, our public safety concern. We also quarterly have our Community Safety Advisory Council update with our CSAC chairs you should all, well, the ones who have CSP sites should have an invite for our next quarterly meeting, which is May 26th, I believe. And that allows us to sit at the table with all of our partners to address any of the concerns, hold each other accountable, talk about what's working, what's not working, and my efforts and the CSP's efforts towards embedding this policing philosophy throughout LAPD. So from daily to divisional to monthly to quarterly, and then we've created a biannual. And biannually, we are looking at a new form of CompStat through CSP, and that's called the Community-Based Evaluation, CBE. That will replace CompStat for CSP. And what that CBE will be is CSP, Housing Authority, council districts, our community safety advisory councils, our city partners, sitting in a room looking at our qualitative analysis and our quantitative analysis to have a discussion about the vectors in our community, what we did to address the crime prevention through environmental design reports that were done, how are we engaging and amplifying what has been identified by the community, and simply just to have a conversation in a circle with our city partners to address the root causes of what's going on in our community. Annually, we're going to do public sentiment surveys in our community. We just completed 1,000 surveys total for all 10 of our CSP sites. Those surveys were administered by an outside entity. The community was taught how to administer surveys, and they went out and asked questions to the community as it relates to the service they're getting from law enforcement, as it relates to some of their public safety concerns, and as it relates to programming and what they would like to see in their community. Those reports were provided back to CSP. They were also discussed with the community and transparent and shared with the community. And we utilized those sentiment surveys to go back and reevaluate ourselves. So we've created this comprehensive, we call it a honeycomb, where we look at what we're doing daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, and annually to ensure that we're engaging with the community. Something else that we did as it relates to feedback and being transparent is we created a website, www.lapdcsp.org. And on that website, we have the community sentiment surveys. We have the site safety plans that we're working on. We identify calendars. Someone can log on and figure out what's going on in Gonzaga Village or San Fernando Gardens. It has a picture of the senior lead officer and the officers assigned to your community. And it's an update. Anything you want to know about that neighborhood engagement area is filtered through our new CSP website. Something else that we've done is we finally got our CSP school post-certified. It's a 3-day school that every single CSP officer will go through. And the premise of that 3-day training, number one, is not just LAPD-led. Intervention, prevention, our community partners are all involved in this CSP school. And we also just finished our draft of our CSP manual. This philosophy's been in place for 11 years, but we never had a manual. How to? What are some of the main ingredients you need to create and implement a CSP program? That draft of that manual should be on Chief Moore's desk as we speak, and that too helps solidify this philosophy, and hoping that some of the components from it will be embedded throughout the LAPD. I'm going to mention one last thing and then I'll stop. I also am the chair of the Community Relations and Trust Building component for our response to the After Action Report. And one of the recommendations for the After Action Report from the Civil Unrest was for the department to create a best practices committee. Commander Brockway is going to talk a little bit about that best practices committee. But the primary purpose of that committee, working hand in hand with Commissioner Luke Calanche, the Office of Operations, DEI, and CSPB, is to define what community engagement is and building community capacity is, and then internally looking at all of our engagements across all 21 divisions to ensure that our engagement is equitable, and looking at ways to provide feedback and follow-up back to our community once we meet, so we're not meeting just to meet. And then looking at our mission statement, our core values, to ensure that it reflects this 24th century policing model as it relates to trust building, creating partnerships, and truth and reconciliation. So with that, I will hand it over to Commander Brockway to talk about the senior lead officers and a bit about the best practices committee.
Councilwoman, if you want to take a break, or you want me to go ahead, any questions for the chief before I get started?
Well, yeah, no, Chief Tinkeridis, I thought that was terrific. And I think, I was in attendance with Commissioner Calanche with the Senior Lead Officer Summit a couple of weeks ago. And, and I think all of the tenets of what you're speaking about are really valuable in terms of how you measure it. I think the truth is these aren't things that are inherently, they've never quite been part of the training. I know for the CSP officers, it was intentional, working with Urban Peace Institute and some of the other influences. I know I got an opportunity to go speak to the new CSP officers when they were being, introduced to the work that they were going to be doing at the San Fernando Gardens. And so that was very, intentional. But what we have amongst the senior lead officers, we don't have that manual. We don't have that same level of instructive content that helps to assure consistency across the board. Commander Cortez knows one of the senior lead officers I always remark upon that used to be at Mission Division was Chacon. Chacon, he to me was the original senior leader. He was the original CSP officer, if you will. He understood every corner of the area that he patrolled. It was his part of his assignment, and he worked intentionally with the council offices, with all the city partners to do all of these things. And when I go back to being a former staff member for Mayor Reardon, when I was doing organizing in North Hills, when it used to be the witch's hat, before it was, when it was three bureaus or three divisions rather that were covering that area, how we were intentional about weaving in all the resources in that area. That doesn't always happen anymore. And rather than cite examples, I just, the goal of all of this and the nature of this conversation is what CSP is doing and training, I think, are valuable assets, but they need to be permeated across how we do all levels of community engagement. This isn't something that because you have a P2 designation or a sergeant, this is community policing at its best. We're there to do the prevention work. We're there to be the problem solvers, to work as a spoke among all the different spokes in the wheels of what city services and what customer services, because we're all in that service business. And so I appreciate how you've really framed all of those pieces, because, and I know Mr. Buscaino has been, he has been a broken record on this about how important it is for everyone to kind of have a CSP mindset. I couldn't agree more. And I think these are also very important tenets that we need to make sure that are being reinforced, not just at the senior lead officer level, but this is who we are as a department. And this is who we, the function of the service that is provided there. We shouldn't have to be taught to be respectful and like figure out how we can approach these circumstances sometimes. But just, or even just to pick up the phone and call someone back, those are parts of the pieces of the job. But I thank you for kind of framing all of that work, because I know it's kind of in design, and it's, again, as you mentioned, the manual and developing all of this since CSP has become a bureau is something that's being further memorialized. But we have a whole network of senior lead officers, and this work should not only be held to the areas where we have CSPs designated, because scaling that up isn't something that financially is going to be feasible. But how do we take the infrastructure, the human infrastructure that we have, and make sure that they are applying the same tools to help be as effective as the approach that we're taking with, and as intentional as with the approach that we're taking with CSP. And so I just wanted to take a moment, and colleagues, I don't know if you want to chime in on anything before we allow Commander Brockway to. Very good. Okay, Commander Brockway, it's all yours.
One thing, Councilwoman, I agree with you 100%. Something else I'd like to add is we are in the process of starting a CSP for Patrol loan program. We will take 2 patrol officers from a division on loan for 2 months with CSP officers. We're going to do a pre-survey and a post-survey of those officers. We're looking at either LMU or UPI to help us do that pre and post survey. And that pre-survey will consist of questions like, do you think you can implement CSP policing philosophies in patrol? What is your understanding of engagement? It'll be a set of 5 or 6 questions. When they're done with that 2-month loan, they'll do a post survey of their understanding of this philosophy in this model. We're going to rotate folks out for a year. So we'll have 36 officers that went through that CSP patrol loan program. And then out of that, we're hoping to take that data and create a CSP for Patrol school and train all 9,300 LAPD officers in that one-day school. It's not as intense as the 3-day CSP school, but it'll have the tenets and the core components of that relationship-based policing philosophy in that one-day school that we're hoping the entire department will go through. The second thing is LAPD has an app, LAPD University app. We are working with Training Division to put an 8-hour block in that app that officers can log into and also learn about CSP, Truth and Reconciliation, community engagement. And so there are some things that we are looking at to push this out within the department, because I do agree with you that that we need to have a consistent messaging and understanding. Sorry.
Terrific, thank you.
If I
Commander
can, Madam
Brockway,
Chair.
go ahead. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No,
Mr.
Chiefs and
Buscaino.
Greedies, if I can quickly before we get to Billy. If you recall when we were going through the academy, we did like a 1-day loan assignment out in the field. Thoughts of having our recruits in the academy be exposed to the CSP program prior to going out as a 1-week loan. Is that on the table?
That was something I have discussed with Dr. Pinnell. One thing that we have been embedded in since the Bureau has been stood up is CSP is now taught in PSL. So when the recruits are 6 months out and then 1 year out, CSP officers are going and teaching about the philosophy. We're also teaching a block in command development and watch commander school, leadership school, sergeant school. So we've been able to embed ourselves in some of the main training functions throughout the LAPD. And Dr. Pinnell and I have had conversations about the possibility of having recruits come and spend a day with CSP prior to graduation.
Thanks, Amada.
Amada, real quick, I'm sorry, I apologize. But when we talk about this, not to make suggestions, but the caliber of which bureau or which CSP, given the performance, I think matters as well. The exposure that they get based on, the very best practice versus those that perhaps need greater refinement matters. So I would just kind of ask that we're very intentional about where we provide the right example and the model of what that looks like, because I would say that they're not all equal.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Commander Brockway, you're on.
You sure you want me to follow after that?
I think you have to make that decision, sir.
All right. I'm not going to say I quit, but thank you, Lana. On a serious note, my experience before CSP was different. And if the members that are on this call don't recall, I was the Southwest Division, and then I received a phone call saying that I was going to CSPB to go work with the MATA, and exposed to the great work that CSPB does. Then shortly thereafter, being promoted to commander and working at OO, the Office of Operation, the homeless coordinator. I also oversee public engagement section, which is the entity that put together the training that we had, the councilwoman you were at with Ms. Calanche, and to have an opportunity over the last 10 months to meet with senior lead officers throughout the entire city, to have conversations about what's working, what's not working, to qualify what our success looks like, and then to quantify what our success looks like. So with that, the 10 months that led up to our SLO Summit, there's a lot of open dialogue, a lot of conversation about what works across the board. And the thing that people kept asking about that were senior lead officers is building consistency and structure. And we need to have that consistency and structure throughout the entire city, all 21 divisions, CSPB, with the MTA as well. So creating the best practices, kind of a task force to kind of hash this out and to have this open dialogue culminated with what happened on April 20th. To have over 180 senior lead officers, including CSPB, and I'm embarrassed to say this, and Chief Tingarides can talk about this for a second, maybe CSP wasn't 100% invited to some of these meetings in the past. We wanted to ensure that that was taking place, because in the 2 years since we've been in this pandemic, that conversation and that lack of communication permeated across the entire city. So we needed to bring everybody together. And I can tell you that at the end of that day, the conversation was fantastic. The surveys and speaking with Commissioner Calanche, that open dialogue is making a difference. And to be able to have a best practices meeting today led by Chief Moreno and Chief Tingarides, and to continue kind of rehashing and reevaluating what worked at our SLO Summit, maybe what we can do a little bit better, and to ensure that we're moving forward to keep the communication going and the dialogue going. Now, we can quantify, based upon the report that was submitted a year ago, by the number of times somebody hits the code 6 button, that we had a community engagement that was done. I can tell you this, prior to us reinforcing, ensuring that we quantify our success by hitting that code 6 button for community engagement through our mobile digital computer, we were averaging about 250 times a month that somebody was pushing that button. Since we pushed out a notice at the end of last year, we've been averaging about 20% more, a little bit over 300 to 310. So that's a perfect example of how we can quantify, maybe ComStat that information to show that people are making that decision. Hey, I'm on a footbeat, I'm walking in Ramona Gardens, or I'm having coffee with Captain or coffee with the community, to be able to quantify what that success looks like. Other things that we are able to track moving forward as we get out of the pandemic is our days of dialogue. We can quantify that, the number of days of dialogue that we have moving forward, and the surveys that come out as a result of that. Utilizing CSP as our model to ensure that we are emulating that throughout all 21 geographic divisions as well as the MTA. That's going to be critical as we move forward, as we kind of pilot through what that community ComStat is going to look like. Chief Tingarides just mentioned it in great detail. As we get closer to that, we're going to have to refine that as our model moving forward throughout the entire city. Our SARA projects, our NEAs that the chief mentioned, ensuring that we have those and people are taking context of what those issues are so that we can work on it. One of the projects that just came out today, near and dear to my heart, is to include in our SARA projects and our NEAs a box now so we can quantify people experiencing homeless issues, the RV issues, the encampment issues, and everything that's related to that. So we just don't pile it into narcotics or gangs. We can absolutely quantify people experience homelessness. So just a couple of little things that I wanted to kind of mention. The quantifiable stuff is sometimes a little bit boring, but at the same time, we're on it to ensure that we continue to see those 10 and 15 and 20% increases of people hitting code 6 on our MDCs, talking specifically about the community engagement that we're doing. Be it a foot beat, like I mentioned, coffee with a captain, doing some teaching at a community event, or just being on the phone with a community member, explaining how we're going to build that community capacity. When Commissioner Kalance came to me and said, how are we going to build community capacity? I didn't know what that meant. I really didn't understand it. But as she explained it over and over again, it's very clear that we have an opportunity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to educate the community, to engage the community, and to have the ability to follow through to see what success looks like, and use that model at the direction of CSP to ensure we create that consistency, we create that structure, so that the officers that are coming on the job, or who have 10, 15, 20 years on the job, can look at something on a piece of paper or a presentation done by us to have that discussion on what we can do to work better with the community, as part of the community, be it the Valley, the South Bureau, the West Bureau, or Central Bureau. We're all here for one reason, to make a difference. So I'll kick it back to you, Councilwoman, with any questions or concerns. I know it's not a presentation like a good chief, but the quantifiable data we are definitely tracking. We are trying to make sure that we're pushing out notices to our personnel to reinforce how important it is for us to capture that information and that data.
Well, I want to thank you for that. And Mr. Harris Dawson, I know, can share his experience with what community capacity building looks like. He comes from a long history of doing that. But you mentioned the Sarah projects, and I just want to let you all know, when I first got the report about the measure of the activities of the senior lead officers and how Sarah projects were among the measures used to evaluate the activity of the senior lead officers, I pulled a list for OVB, and for the entire San Fernando Valley, there were only 20 Sarah projects. Now, just to give you the context, because you all know this, Natalie, you're smiling because you know exactly where I'm going with this. We got a lot more than 20 issues in these neighborhoods across the San Fernando Valley, which represents nearly half of the entire city's population. There's a lot of work to be done. And so the purpose of this conversation, Commander, and everyone that's here, is we need to elevate the standard of what this engagement looks like. We need to have greater accountability. And this isn't something that's to placate us, and nor is it something to placate the community. I'd be happy if some of my neighborhoods just got phone calls back. And that's a really sad measure of what we're talking about here. But the reason why we're having this conversation is because we need greater accountability with this. I know how, and just to be clear, I understand that the areas that they're covering are much larger. But when we have areas where people have been in those communities preceding even me getting elected, and they still haven't met the park director in that neighborhood, there's a disconnect. And so I just want to be clear that we are really intentional, that it is not just a CSP bureau and those individuals assigned to this neighborhood. And it's to not make commentary about it's because it's not across the board, because as Natalie knows, she could tell you, I can talk about Mission and many of the members over at Mission. I think it's just really important that we have a really honest and transparent conversation about how we're measuring this in every other community. Because when we talk about some of these smaller, again, when people tell me, well, homicides are down, or some of these very more violent, I like to, I'm someone who grew up in the 91331. And I grew up with bars on my windows, okay? As a kid growing up in my neighborhood, we had bars on our windows. I would love our communities to get to the point where they don't feel like they need to have bars on their windows. I would love an opportunity for our communities to not feel like they have to have German Shepherds and Pit Bulls and fenced up properties. And our senior lead officers and our officers in all of our divisions present the opportunity for us to layer in all of the resources necessary that help engender that feeling and that sense of safety. And the reason why I bring this up is because as someone who grew up with bars on her windows, my parents were the block captains for our neighborhood watch. And so it's how we intentionally engage these neighborhoods that are feeling this way and building that neighborhood capacity, just as CSP is doing at the public housing sites. You have to consider every neighborhood is no different than a CSP site. And that's the kind of mindset I'm eager to see permeate across the city of Los Angeles. And so I needed to bring up the SARA projects, because even when I mentioned the SARA projects to other colleagues who were completely unaware that was a methodology and an approach to helping to problem solve, I think I'm glad you mentioned with respect to homelessness, because there's inconsistent approaches or commentaries that I get back from the community where people say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. We need to be consistent. Consistency matters, and it consistently needs to be across every zip code. So with that, I'm gonna stop talking. If someone wants to address the lack of SARA projects in the San Fernando Valley, I invite you to help me understand. But I suspect there will not be a sufficient explanation for it. But I would be remiss if I didn't call it out, because if this is what we do to measure, then there's a failure in measuring.
Maybe I can help.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, it's not for you.
I'm just okay, but I walked in those shoes. SARA projects, scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. I remember that was a P3 test question. So, Madam Chair, it's like when I remember having this argument with my peers at the Harbor Crow Slow office. As officers, especially senior lead officers, we know they do everything from marriage counseling to mentoring the kid at the Boys and Girls Club to making sure you help neighbors address their disputes over a loud dog. But we have found a department now that's heavily focused on Part 1 crimes, on the reduction of violent crime, to the point where now senior lead officers they're mini specialized units dealing with homelessness, dealing with gang crimes, and I agree with you, Monica, that we're kind of pulling away from the whole mission of being a senior lead, which I recall activating the business community, Business Watch, activating the neighborhood watch programs, to the point where I was pulled so many times to not attend a neighborhood watch group so that we can I got pulled to work with the gang unit. So it's I can see where you're coming from. I think the reason why you're not seeing SARA projects in the valleys, because you have the slows who are getting pulled to address and help supplement some of the specialized units to address the Part 1 crimes. So there's a lot of frustrations as well. Maybe we can streamline the SARA project. I remember the SARA project was like a 12-page report. It was if we can streamline it, maybe put it on an app or something, because it was a pain in the butt to even initiate a SARA project, because there's a lot of paperwork.
Well, I think honestly, Joe, and what I'm getting to is, and Natalie, you can speak to how Chacon was, but it was like we just pulled everybody together and we said, all right, where are our hotspots? Yeah. And you basically owned your area, And you know, it was the survey, to your point, survey assessment. It was, okay, I'm doing a community assessment in this area. I know where my hotspots are, where I've got trafficking, where I've got homelessness, where I've got young people that are walking to or from school that are under duress of being exposed to certain illicit activities. You've got all your hotspots. So how do you take that and you say, okay, well, you know what the problem is? The trees are overgrown here. Councilwoman, can you help me get those trees trimmed so that you know, the light is brighter and exposed in this area so that we don't have illicit activity happening in this area? It's a collaboration. It's a partnership. Yep. And what I'm, you know, I don't think a Sarah project has to be that complicated. I think there are many, but when there's none or very few that represent half of the city, kind of begs the question. And so I'm just saying we can do better. And I want us to make sure that we're all engaged in this conversation in a manner that helps to build out better practice, better consistency across every division. And I think it helps us all. It helps our officers. I think it better supports our officers. It helps to establish the collaborations that need to exist amongst many of our offices, because you and I both know this, you know, like, we do it together. And but we have to help build that consistency where people won't know the difference whether they're in Pacoima or in West LA.
I'm glad I happen to partner with you. Happy to partner with you on this, Chair, because there was times when I felt that, you know, I got called out from my peers on spending too much time with the community and not making enough arrests. To be honest with you, that I was spending too much time at the local park or the after-school program at the Boys and Girls Club, or spending too much time with the teen advisory panels, and not enough time hooking and booking. Let's be honest with ourselves here. But it's like, at the same time, you see, you know, spikes crime go up and down, and you use the Crow Slows, now CSP, as specialized units.
Well, I think there's nothing that obstructs people, like, for example, and, you know, the slows, you know, again, these are about some of the preventative measures that we need to be taken. That's what this, for me, that's the most important part of this work. If we're working on, you know, I'm a broken record on this. If we focus on enforcement efforts alone, if we're waiting till the 911 call, we're already too late. So how do we help seed the building blocks in these neighborhoods to get them resourced and in such a way? It's an organizing tool. And Mr. Harris Dawson, you know what, you know, you get this.
If I may chime in. Oh, please, sir.
No, I
go ahead.
was just going to add, you know, I appreciate this conversation. I mean, one of my observations is a few observations on this. One, you know, I will admit to being stunned by the success of CSP and the extent to which officers having the skills and the relationships in the community actually makes a difference. So in the beginning of CSP, it's not like crime drops immediately in the first few months, but what happens is the clearance rate goes up dramatically because people are willing to talk to the police officers because they know them. And they have relationships with them. And so, you know, it makes a tremendous difference. The tough part, I think Mr. Buscaino gets at, though, it's very difficult to quantify. I mean, I could sit here and tell you a dozen stories where things don't happen because of relationships CSP officers have, or because they can predict with neighbors, they can predict things, and they can just be there before it happens. So, but nobody gets any credit for that. Like it doesn't go down on a chart as an arrest or a.
Sure.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and I've also seen and get very troubled by, you know, I'll have officers that are not CSP kind of talk about my officers that are CSP as like, oh well, you know, they're fancy social workers, and you know that's just until the department leans in and really acknowledges the value of doing business this way. I think we're going to continue to see challenges with how to measure, but also moving a bigger share of our armed personnel into that, you know, way of thinking and way of relating to the city and to neighborhoods.
Thank you. Commander Cortez?
Hi, thank you for having me. I just want to talk a little bit about MTA, but I would like to also share a Sarah success story that we just recently have here. MTA, we have 5 senior leads. It's a unique position because the community we serve are always in transition, you know, to and from work or whatever locations, but we also serve a community of bus drivers, rail operators, janitors, and, you know, other employees at these critical sites. One thing that we do to measure success, or a couple things we do, for one is our senior leads all complete a log. So within that log, I'm able to see contacts. Are they going to wrap sessions, which is with the drivers and the operators. But it also lets me know they have lesser reports that we come, law enforcement related reports that we get here, that they investigate, almost like a we tip, but for MTA. So I know how many they're handling. But one thing we launched here the last couple months since I was here is each senior lead were assigned a Sarah project. Coming from, as the councilwoman knows me well, we work together quite often. That Sarah project allowed them to have an opportunity to really focus in on an issue in each one of their areas. And that was a great opportunity. We had new senior lead officers here, and we do have a younger generation of senior lead officers. So it allowed them to focus. One of the senior leads had a really quick win and really was into it, because at first they said, okay, we're going to do a Sarah project. You know, this is what you have going on. Came to me so proud. Before and after pictures. We picked an area over on 102nd Street in Southeast Division. It's an MTA parking lot that was overrun by, you know, drugs, blight, tents, prostitutions, everything you could think of. The senior lead had an opportunity to work with CSP, work with Southeast Division SLOs, the council district that they finally built a relationship, the HOPE team we have here, our SPEW team, and cut through some of the red tape at an MTA parking lot where, you know, some of the divisions, who do we get a hold of? What can we do? Was able to use their position as a senior lead, cut through the red tape, and that area is beautiful. The community is happy. We've already seen, I believe it was like over a 20% reduction in crime just within that neighborhood. And it was nice to show, look at, by building relationships, you know, a senior lead at MTA is important too. And working with the other senior leads, I think everybody learned, and it was a big win for the community. So yes, I'm a big supporter of Sarah projects. You know that, Council Member Rodriguez. And I think those small wins are really important in that collaboration. If I may just speak a little bit more about what our senior leads are doing, I think it'd be good for this this conversation, is we're doing a Respect the Ride. We're collaborating with MTA, their security, their police, the janitors, the people on the street. They do an outreach program, and we're working the rail lines right now. We're working at 7th and Metro, bringing that back for the community to feel safe. They're going to be doing a survey. We're excited about to see the results, but just looking at Pershing Square, 7th and Metro, and now what we're going to start doing at Union Station. And that's our senior leads out there, engaging the community when they can, engaging the officers that are working the line, and, you know, the business communities. So we're excited to see what our senior leads can do and continue to, like Commander Brockway said, we can't always, you know, quantify it, but to qualify it with good results and community contacts, we're pretty proud of what we have going on here at MTA.
And thank you, Commander Cortez. I think even when you talk about the RAP and those engagements, but again, those are measures that you all have at MTA. So we have those measures for MTA and those SLOs, we have it for CSP. I think where we're seeing some of this gaping hole here, I don't need to explicitly say it. So I'm just talking about consistency, so that, because it's clearly there are approaches that work. And so let's figure out how we, you know, make this permeate across the board. Because to your point, you know, there is a great sense of satisfaction when you work to resolve some of these critical areas. The one thing I was surprised to hear you say, though, is the HOPE officers, because I thought that was disbanded by, we haven't regained HOPE.
No, at MTA here, we have a contract with them, and they have a contracted homeless outreach program that works on MTA property. And we've had some fantastic successes and many stories we could share, like we used to talk about when we had that in the valley now.
Yeah, because we're resuming, obviously, enforcement on some of these recreational vehicles in particular, and those are going to require some additional support. So we should be engaged in that conversation. But that's unrelated to this. That's separate. But thank you for that. So, colleagues, I think that. Actually, Commander Cortez, can you talk to me a little bit about the complaints tracking system?
Our complaint tracking system here, basically, like any other division, we look at those complaints. I myself see all complaints that come through, no matter, regardless of their disposition, and it also goes to Chief Graham. We take them very serious because of the fact that it is, a very transitory system, and to ensure that we don't have any issues. Our biggest, area that we want to work on and that we've seen is there has been some moments of discourtesy, and we take those serious because this is an important position. We're a contracted position, and so we try to get in front of those very quickly and make sure we have the right people coming here working the overtime positions. We've really seen a big decrease in the complaints, and we're really proud of the work that we're seeing. Body-worn video is on all of our officers, so we regularly ensure that that's checked. For a while, it wasn't required up until a point last year, but now it's required for everybody to have it. So, like I said, we're really seeing a big decrease.
So what is the methodology of deriving these? How is that? Is it an app? How is that derived? Because, I mean, it would seem to me that that's, when we talk about, this is a customer service application, if you will. So,
well, we have a complaint tracking system, so we keep track of all, public complaints or personnel complaints. In addition to the lessers is those law enforcement surveys too that we get. If there's the lessers are complaints from the employees about different type of behavior from suspects, not necessarily the officers. If they are officer related, the employees complain about the officers, it's a public complaint, we take that. We have a tracking system here, we look at all of them, and we ensure we're either going up or we're, right now we're going down, and I like the direction it's going. It's about
That's great, but I appreciate that, but is that any different or operated independent from any other methodology that when people have a complaint about any, so it's the same system?
Yes, we use the same department procedures and policies. Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay, that was my question. Okay, terrific. Colleagues, were there any other questions? Mr. Harris-Dawson, Mr. Buscaino? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all. And Mr. Clerk, if we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Lee is absent. Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris-Dawson.
Yes.
Councilmember Koretz. Councilmember Koretz is absent. 3 ayes, and this item is approved.
Thank you. And now that brings us to our last item on today's agenda, which is item 15.
Item number 15 is a city attorney report and ordinance relative to adding section 56.15.3 to the Los Angeles Municipal Code to prohibit the assembly, disassembly, sale, offer of sale, distribution, offer of distribution, or storage of bicycles and bicycle parts on public property.
Thank you. Mr. Buscaino, did you have any?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, for scheduling this ordinance today.
Very curious.
During the past several years, we have seen a proliferation of bike chop shops, informal operations where bikes are disassembled and parts are sold or traded on sidewalks and other public spaces. Most often, these bicycles are stolen, quickly disassembled, and sold for parts. Unlike a motor vehicle where VIN numbers are placed in multiple locations, serial numbers on bikes are usually only in one location and are much easier for thieves to file off. Additionally, most bike owners don't keep documentation of serial numbers, which makes it difficult for officers to prove a specific bicycle that matches the description
of one reported stolen. In fact, the same bike. The ordinance before us is modeled after a similar ordinance in one of my neighboring cities, Long Beach, making it a criminal offense to operate a bicycle chop shop in public areas. I believe that this ordinance before us will give LAPD a necessary tool to reduce bicycle theft, clean up our streets, and improve the quality of life for residents across the city. I do want to thank Regina Choi and Valerie Flores from the City Attorney's Office for quickly drafting this ordinance before us and addressing the concerns of members expressed in our previous hearing. So thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Mr. Hurst-Austin, did you have any? Nope. Okay. Okay, Mr. Clerk, if you go ahead and please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Lee is absent. Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris-Dawson.
Yes.
Councilmember Koretz. Councilmember Koretz is absent. 3 ayes, and this item is approved.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I believe, Mr. Clerk, have we cleared the desk?
The desk is clear, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Our meeting
Thank
is
you all.
adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.